So today, meeting with Adam Metcalf. Super excited about the time. If you're just tuning in, never been on, watched before, this is an only co-production called Standouts. And the whole idea was sort of born out of the desire to take the conversations I was having just every week and find ways to give other people access to the content, to the dialogue. And so I'd finish up a 30-minute meeting or an hour-long meeting and go, man, it'd be so cool if other people could have been a part of that or been able to watch it and check it out. So I thought, well, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just have these conversations, try to do it semi-regularly? And so I'm super excited to be here with Adam. Adam's a good friend of mine. We got to know each other probably 10 years ago or a little more than that now. And he's the co-founder of a company called Zeemee. So we're going to get into it here in a little bit. But yeah, thanks again, Adam, for being a part of this.
Yeah, I'm excited to be live with you, Josh. It's cool. You said that, usually, you wanted people to kind of drop in, eavesdrop on exciting conversations, but with me on the show, it may not be that exciting. So we'll see
whatever
how that goes for you.
Whatever. But so I kind of know your story. But I'd love a refresher. Just like, how did Adam get from where you were born to where you are now?
Yeah, well, super short. Like, grew up in upstate New York, moved to Russia when I was in college, met a girl from Wyoming there. So came to Wyoming, got married, was in education for a number of years in China, and then in teaching high school actually in Sheridan, and then started a company about 8-9 years ago to help students transition from high school to college. So
yeah. And did you always know that you would start, like, want to be an entrepreneur or do a startup, or was that a long time passion, or was it like, oh, this could be cool?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think that one interesting piece of that is basically our educational system, and I think how we probably inadvertently drive that desire out of people. I think as Americans, we can naturally be entrepreneurial just based on a lot of things that happen in our culture. So I grew up very entrepreneurial. I had my first, baseball card trading post. I advertised in the newspaper and everything when I was 10 years old. When I was 11, 12, I was going door to door sales, trying to sell stuff out of these catalogs I'd get. And so, yeah, I started very early in terms of had my own, newspaper route, like just trying to do things that are entrepreneurial and kind of manage your own little business. And then I think as I went through the educational system, high school, college, the focus becomes so outcome driven in the sense of you need to get a job, right? You need to find, that right employer and, get an income as you come out of college. And so my whole mindset got changed as I went through that educational system and started thinking more along the lines of I need to find a job versus I need to start a company and, potentially create jobs. So yeah, I think that was kind of a product of our educational system.
Mm-hmm. And do you think sort of your feelings around the way the education system kind of works, because you've been an educator, and then your feelings about that as well as career and all this stuff, is some of that, I guess, perspective baked into the origin of Zeemee at some level, or not?
I think in our culture it is, right? Like, I want people at Zeemee to feel free at any point to leave Zeemee and to go and start their own company, go and start their own initiative, right? And so I think that, or go on to whatever they want. So I think that part of it is embedded into the culture. In the early genesis of Zeemee, right? The idea that Zeemee's a playoff of See Me, and every company back then was naming themselves with a Z, so we named it Zeemee. I think that there's probably embedded within that, terminology, the idea of, like, everybody has this unique narrative and they have a story, and we wanted to celebrate that story, and people can do, whatever it is they want to do. They don't need to be defined by their test scores, right? So that was the other thing, that being an educator in the system here in the United States, and actually, around the world, it's the same mostly, is that we put such an emphasis on summative exams, ACT, SAT, right? And then we're trying to assign value to a student's future worth based on how they test. And, for us at Zeemee, like we just felt like that was wrong way to, look at students and wrong way to evaluate them. We later turned, evolved into a social community where students connect and engage and find friends before they reach campus. But that was the early genesis of Zeemee.
So as far as like, I don't know if you guys, you might use different words for it, but sometimes we describe like this villain that you kind of prop up as an entrepreneur to say, this is not good. The way this is like the status quo, like needs to be solved. There's a problem to solve. Right.
Yeah.
And so how do you think that problem has shifted, like in the vision of Zeemee? And like, I know you just mentioned it kind of went more towards community, but what is that villain, or sometimes we call it like a cultural enemy? How do you think that has changed, in the framework of Zeemee in the marketplace and kind of the passion behind it? And you've been at it for a while now.
I mean, something we're really passionate about is taking relationships that start digitally, so relationships that start online or in an app, and turning them to in real life IRL relationships. That's something that we're really passionate about. The reason we're passionate about that, the villain that we see that seeped into society so deeply, is isolation, depression, anxiety. 61% of students on campus today report feeling lonely frequently or all the time the last 12 months, right? 72% of global workers say that they feel extremely lonely at work. So we have a loneliness epidemic in the United States, further exacerbated by COVID. And so Zeemee is in a place of, we want to mitigate that. We want to enter in and we want to help people make relationships and end up building those relationships in real life. So we're really, in a way, the antithesis of a metaverse, right? We don't believe that the future of the world is a metaverse. We think that there's probably value that's going to be driven via a metaverse, but we don't want people to spend more time in a VR headset. We don't want more, people to spend more time on an app. We want them to use an app, right, in a way that allows them to make real life relationship. And so that's what we do for our college communities right now. And that's really, if you were to say, the villain or the pain point that we address is the loneliness epidemic.
Yeah. It's interesting that the more sort of connected, I'll say that in like air quotes, we are, like the more alone sometimes we feel. It's paradoxical. It's like I can call anyone, or I could FaceTime someone, or I could join a live stream and talk to people, or I could do all these things. And yet at the end of the day, where does the real connection come from? Where does the real relationship come from? And not saying you can't have that in those places, but it just is, it's interesting that literally the more connected we are, sometimes the more lonely we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've done studies on this, right? Where the human being is actually only capable of really having 150 relationships, friendships or relationships. And so, I mean, I actually don't even have Facebook, just because it became so unmanageable in terms of, if you have 1,000 friends per se, or people that you've met through your life, like, it's so difficult to keep up with them. It's so difficult to keep like interjecting into the conversation or liking the content. Like, it's not real community. It's cool in a sense, like, yeah, like I love to like celebrate this person or see what they're doing, or, but at the same time, it's just not my close, intimate community. And so I think that in order for me to be effective, I have to hone in on the people that are around me for the most part, or people that I've built up really strong relationships with over the years.
Yeah, that's right on. As far as where Zeemee, maybe share like where's the product sit right now? Like as Zeemee, I mean, you've tried a lot of different things over the years, and some have worked, some haven't, and you've gotten rid of things and tried new things. Where does it sit today? Like where's the core of the product? How does it kind of fit in the marketplace?
Yeah. So our core business is colleges. So we partner with 160 plus colleges and universities today to help them create a community where students can, before they even apply, start seeing who else is interested, make friends, match on interests. So if I'm interested in like backpacking, camping, I can put that into the app, and it's going to match me with other students at University of Wyoming, for example, that have that same passion and interest. And then we help you find roommates. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if a college is using a community to help students connect, it's going to impact their enrollment, right? Because as you're a student going through the enrollment cycle, and you're, applying to a school that only has like this Facebook admitted group that nobody in Gen Z still uses, like, you're just not going to make those relationships and friendships like a school that's using a product like Zeemee, where they're helping you connect even earlier. And that's going to end up impacting the college's yield, right? So what percentage of your admitted students actually end up attending? And so that's really where we hone in, and that's why colleges pay us to create those communities.
And for like colleges that don't have Zeemee, like what do they rely on to try to increase yield, or like what are the other options, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of those colleges just kind of revert back to more traditional technology. So they'll try to text message students, they'll call them. Of course, they're doing on-campus events and things of that nature. All good things, right? I mean, they're things you can definitely do. A lot of schools still will try to connect students on a Facebook admitted group. Shockingly, right? 3% of Gen Z indicates Facebook is their platform of choice today. A lot of Gen Z students, in the moment they get accepted to college, like if the college is saying, meet with other students in our admitted group, it's the first time they're getting Facebook, right? Like they don't have Facebook. I have a 14-year-old daughter, right? Like she or none of her friends have Facebook. It's not a thing. But still some of these schools do it. They set it up. So the kid gets in there and says, hey, like I'm Adam, I'm from Wyoming, excited to meet with y'all. Here's my snap, I'm out, right? And so they bounce the moment they get into that group because they know college is watching. They know mom, grandma, even great grandma's on the platform. So there's no privacy associated with it. And so they just want their own organic space.
Yeah, that's interesting. I in the past I've thought about it a little as like you have the adult table and you have like the kid table. And,
yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And you look at the Gen Z and these other social networks that are out there. It's like there's the kid table isn't just because they're like pushed to the kid table. There's a certain level of community and dialogue that takes place at the kid table, and over time the kid table becomes the adult table and the new
you're right.
You know what I mean? Like it just bubbles with that generation, like I'm a Facebook user, like I was in college when Facebook pretty much came out, and so it's still like, I'm on there all the time, So.
And I mean, you think about like all companies face that paradox in a sense, right? Like you look at Snapchat, like at what point do students that are growing up, like their parents are using Snapchat, like are they going to continue to use it, right? If it's the place where mom and dad are messaging me, may not be the platform of choice for the future, right?
Yeah, it's like no longer cool.
Right. The moment, Gen Z grows up and like all their cool, TikTok dance videos, like, is that cool anymore? I mean, I tend to think not, but so every company has to kind of innovate as they continue to grow there. I think Facebook, the way they've done it is through acquisition, right? They continue to buy apps that the students are using, like Instagram, WhatsApp. But Facebook as a whole, Meta, in terms of, what we knew as Facebook.com, like they have lost so much of this younger generation, and they're not coming back.
Yeah. I think they just registered the first time, like the user count dipped, where they have less users on Facebook than they did the quarter before. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Yeah, I didn't see that in terms of their quarterly growth. I deleted my Facebook probably maybe 6 months ago, maybe not even that long ago. I think that, and my decision was more driven by, like, it's just hard for me to keep up with you. I mean, there's people that delete Facebook for political reasons. There's people that delete Facebook for, ethical reasons. There's people that delete Facebook for all sorts of different reasons. For me, it was just, I wasn't really utilizing the platform much. And just like, it almost was like an extra layer of stress, like the idea that I had some other social platform that I had to check, or engage on, even though I wasn't really using it much over the last 10 years, but still just in the back of my mind. Right.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think something that resonated with me at the beginning of you're sharing a little bit of kind of the value of the unique person, like to be seen, that everyone has a unique value and a unique story. So much of the way that I, and I think you and I have talked about this a bit in the past, but when I look at Only Co, the name was sort of born out of this saying that our creative officer had that was like, believe that you have something unique, that only you have something unique to offer the world, and it's kind of cool because if you can believe it, then it can usually happen, in the sense of like, you can step into like, oh, maybe what should I do? Where should I fit in the human scape, if you will, and out of that came Only Co, and the whole premise was to look at the people that make up, like, it's almost like this is kind of funny with your name being Adam, it makes me laugh, but it's like the atoms that make up, like the structure, and we always just look at the people make up the structure of a company. So if the people are unique, which we believe they are, then there's no reason that the company, if you add up and aggregate all the people, that they couldn't come up with a unique position or strategy, differentiation. If everyone's different, then why act like others? You know what I mean? Like, why just copy and paste someone else's strategy? So
yeah, I love that. So what does that look like for you at OnlyCo? Like, what is that unique proposition that you're holding out to clients?
yeah, I mean, it's kind of gets a little bit meta in the sense, like what we want to do is we want to define someone's uniqueness. You know, we want to define their only. And yeah, we can do marketing and deliverables and, you know, other campaigns or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that,
yeah, that is meta, right? I mean,
yeah, our only,
you're the only one that's focused on them finding their only.
Yeah, like our only is finding yours is kind of our find yours is like our tagline.
Right.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, but it's what we're passionate about, because we see companies, and I think it comes from two places. Like, if you're trying to come up with an idea, it's easy to like look over there and be like, oh, look what they're doing. That seems to be working. Let's try that. And then, you know, and that's a good, there's some good qualities to just like not reinventing the wheel and to stand on the shoulders of giants, you know, that whole concept of, you know, like, you don't need to go back to zero. You can build on top of what other people have made. And that's a good thing. But too often, I think we, you know, as business owners, I see this all the time. It's like, I'll say to like a bank, like, what makes you guys unique, you know? And there are literally things that make them unique. But what they say is we're customer centric, we're community first.
Which every bank says.
Great rates. We have this. And we're like, cool. You just described a bank. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's awesome. You described a bank. But if you're the bank that I should use, what do you say? You know, not the bank that, not like if all of you were lined up and there was a long line here and there's you're the shortest line, then I just get in the line because I get the same thing, you know? Yeah,
it's interesting how like nomenclature can, you know, be prescriptive in that right. Like, do you think about like Cowboy State Bank? Like, dude, if you're a cowboy, I'm rolling out to Cowboy State Bank. You know, like, just even the name itself like captures the identity of who that bank is. Like, I don't bank there, right? Like, I'm not a cowboy, but like, if I was a cowboy, I'd want to be at Cowboy State Bank. You know, I wonder if that's like I don't know if they're your client, but like that would be like their only, I feel like.
Yeah, well, but then you have to go, okay, is it just a kitschy name, or how are we going to be?
Right. I think like I've walked in that bank before though, and I feel like it's not, just because I've seen like a bunch of cowboys in there. But like, you know, and maybe that's not their only, but it seems like they can capture that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, like one of our clients down in Casper, the center of state, is like, we work to position them as a mentorship based bank.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like deeper than just relationships. It's like guidance. It's like, you know, some advice. And you have to be careful in the banking world, because there's a line of like liability that takes place if you're advising too much. It's kind of, and you have to be careful. But you can say, hey, here are your options. And we've seen in the past people who do this option, it can lead to these problems, and this option, this can lead to these problems. So you still have to leave it in the hands of the person, and that person they have to make sure that person knows it's their decision and that their banker didn't tell them what to do, you know? But that's good mentorship actually anyway. You know, good mentorship isn't telling someone what to do. It's telling someone, hey, I've been down this path. I've seen this path. This is what I learned through it. And you should factor that in as you're making decisions, you know?
Yeah. That's so cool, man. I love that. And I think you have to tease out that value prop for every business. I mean, we see that in the college industry, right? Like, there's so many like 4-year small private liberal art colleges, and they all say the same thing, right? Like, small classes, like one-on-one attention, you know, and like teasing out, but what's like your unique value prop that you're bringing? What's your only, right, that you're bringing to the world, you know? And, you know, I think of one school, like, they're just so explicit about who they are, right? Like, and whether you agree with it or disagree with it, you can't argue that their value prop is very specific and explicit. And they say, we're a conservative Christian college when you hit their website. Yeah. Like, literally you hit the website, like, conservative Christian college, like, you know, right out the gate what these people are about, right? And again, whether you disagree or agree with that, they're very good at being specific about, you know, who they are and their identity. And that's in some ways their only, right? They might have other value props that are their only, but And I think especially in Wyoming, and why UW has done a great job, I think, of like branding the school. And they had someone that was running marketing there, Jenny Petty, who's now the chief marketing officer in Montana. I mean, she's just phenomenal, right? But came up with like this whole concept of the world needs more cowboys. Like they just capture, right, like that essence of like who we are. But like I think in Wyoming, especially, just all these businesses. I mean, this is an antiquated marketplace, right? A very antiquated marketplace. And I look at, what you do at Only, and it's so fresh. Like I walk in, like when I first came into your guys' office, I was like, oh, this is like a Silicon Valley startup, man. This is like, because I used to live in the Bay Area, and it's just like, man, this is the only company, right? No pun intended. I mean, that time you were flood marketing, but like at that time, like the only company in Wyoming, I think, that is capturing the vibrancy, like the freshness and like, just the energy that is like new and innovative in this state. And that's probably like an overstatement. There's probably a few other places I just don't, other companies I don't know about, but I mean, that blows my mind, dude. Like, like your real Only is like really the only company like itself like this in Wyoming.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And going back to your point about naming, I think naming is an important thing. People I meet with will say like, do you like our name, or do you think our brand is too playful or too fun or too serious or too whatever? And I have to say, like, I don't know. And I'm not just like playing dumb. Like I have to know what is your intended audience. Like what is your position that you want to have in the marketplace? Do you want to be, you can do simple things like low cost provider or premium provider, or you can do things like, the only one that offers a certain experience or delivery, of the product, the only one that uses this technology in this way, things that differentiate. But you have to first say like, who are you? Who aren't you? Or who do you not want to be? Who do you want? And who do you not want? And if you can't get to that spot of clarifying that, you're trying to go after everyone, which means you end up sort of going after no one. At least you're just capturing like the overflow of demand. You're not like creating demand to a certain degree, And so when you think about if for the Cowboy State Bank one, it's kind of interesting one. I haven't ever thought about it, but if they're like, we want to be the bank for Cowboys, then okay. So you name it something that lets people know that. And you also, every decision has to be filtered through what would the bank made for Cowboys do? What would it be like? What would that experience be like? What is painful about being in the ag industry or ag world or working in it that doesn't fit in the normal bank setup, And if you can change your product, change the experience, change the delivery, so people will be like empathetic, right? Like positioning is about having empathy for who it is that you want to attract. And I think sometimes we forget that. And we think if we niche ourselves too much, then it be limiting. And actually in many ways, niching yourself a little bit provides velocity for growth.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that right now play out in a social paradigm, right? These private niche communities that are getting funded by VCs, like Chief is like a private niche community for women leaders, right, in business. Just raised a massive round from venture capitalists. They have a great monetization strategy, but like they know exactly who they are, right? Like we work with women who are in positions of leadership at companies around the world, and we help mentor them, we help them get better, we help them connect, right? And so it's just 100% focused on that. Bravado, right, is a new private niche community that's focused on just salespeople. Like it's 100% on salespeople, right? Also just raised a big round. The niche play in social is becoming much more prominent, I think, because it's not that Facebook and Snap and TikTok, like all these other social platforms have failed. I think it's that there's been obviously like a paradigm of incredible success there, but I think like it left the world wanting more, both from like a marketing perspective, advertising perspective, just various things, and like just community as like a whole. Like as I go from Facebook to Instagram, like Instagram's instantly trying to add in all of my contacts, right? Like Snap's trying to add in all of my contacts. So I'm just moving one network from one platform to the other. And so at the end of the day, like they're just trying to build this massive population on the app where they can monetize on ads, right? And yet maybe there's a better way to do this. Maybe there's a better way of getting away from the web 2.0 type advertising, move more into a web 3.0 type advertising, which is driven more around privacy, driven more around community, and it's niche, right? So I think, like, you know, I'm extrapolating on what you said about niche, but I'm just applying it to some different sectors here in terms of, you know, whether you're holding out niche value propositions as a company, or you're, you know, building community. I think niche community is becoming, you know, more in vogue now than what it once probably was.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Well, I think a niche community drives a lot more utility and function from the person who's trying to find value.
Yeah.
And these blanket communities are kind of noisy. It's like more work, and it's more like it's more vanity, I think, in a lot of ways. I haven't thought a lot about this, but it's like more comparison, and it's just general connection and like community versus like the thing I think that I like that Facebook provides me now more than almost anything is the groups. So like if I'm interested,
we need to create niche. Yeah.
Is like that's how they've niched down, is they go like I bought this old Mazda pickup, and I want to like connect with other people that know about them, and like if I come into problems I can message them. So they basically, it's funny, the way Brett describes it is Facebook has replaced like website forums basically. They've replaced Craigslist through the marketplace. And I think there's one other one that he's described. So it's like, you know, when Facebook was niched out, it was colleges, you know what I mean?
I was going to say, like, it started niche, right? And then it evolved into something much larger, and now they're devolving back into niche because they see the value there.
Yeah. I had an interesting thought the other day about, well, actually this is before Elon and all that stuff with Twitter. But I'm like, man, they should make it celebrity only. Like Twitter should be like celebrity only, and you have to pay.
Dude, then they'd kick me off the platform. I mean, come on now.
I know you're probably a Twitter user. I'm not a Twitter user, so that's why I come up with these dumb ideas. But I'm like, if there is a way, because Twitter has just been like, I don't know if it's been profitable. Maybe it had, man, I don't know. But it's like, it's like, how do you make it super relevant and drive like a scarcity to where like anything, I don't know, to some degree, anything that has scarcity, so therefore like the demand is increasing. You know, you have like the value goes up, you know, the brand goes up when it's like, man, I wish I could get the new Air Jordan, or I wish I could get Air Jordans, you know, it's like, man, gosh, and you know what I mean? Like there's this weird human part of just like the scarcity thing that I'm like, man, I wonder if Twitter could experiment with that a little bit. But
yeah, I mean, they did. I think they hit profitability. I don't know at what point. I don't know what their last quarterly earnings were, but I know that I believe under Jack Dorsey they did have profitability. I mean, like you look at Chief, right? Like this new private social network, they created scarcity by having a wait list, right? So you couldn't just sign up. I mean, you had to be approved. Like it had to vet you out, like, and it took time to actually get in. And then the way they monetize is your company has to pay for you. So the actual person that's signing up to go in, so, you know, leader at an organization, they don't even charge you. They charge the company like $8,000 a year. Right. And so, I mean, think about that monetization strategy. That's crazy. Like not only did they create this scarcity of like, ooh, I want to get into this, right? But now it's like this niche community that has this solid monetization strategy that's tied to, okay, this corporation actually has to pay the way for you to be a part of this. And then, you know, for a large company, like $8,000 a year investing into the growth of one of our key leaders, not that unreasonable, right? So, I mean, what a brilliant play.
Yeah. Great niche right there.
Yeah, it really is.
Pretty cool. That's really cool. So on your journey from the different, like kind of backtracking a little bit, or just casting a broad net, like the different entrepreneurial efforts you've been in, like what do you think, what's your advice or recommendations around how to come at differentiation, to be different? What are maybe a couple tips that or patterns you've seen or things you've learned about standing out amidst, you know, there's a lot of noise and a lot of stuff out there. What do you think you've learned in that journey?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been a good journey for us. I mean, and by God's grace, we're still operating. I mean, if it was up to me, it would have driven the company into the ground a million times over. That's for sure. So, but thankfully, God's been gracious in that and allowed us to continue to operate. In the early days, like what differentiation looked like for us is splash marketing. So we would do just crazy stuff, like, and I mean, you guys are experts at this, right? With Go Fast, Don't Die. Like we would dress up in orange spandex. We'd go to conferences and like dance around. We'd pay the sponsorship to host all the parties, like the socials, and then we'd like deck everybody out in orange, and we'd have like those big dance offs and stuff like that. Like just like splash. Like when people think of Zeemee, they think of fun, they think of fresh, like they think of something vibrant that's coming into the college space. That only went so far. I think that we probably focused a little too much on that and a little too little on revenue. And generating actually, profit and being a sustainable business. So I think that where I would say, today in terms of how do we differentiate, we differentiate with product, right? Like our product is by far like the best community in the college space. Like nothing even comes close. And so, investing in that for us as a tech company is important, and our engineers, and making sure that we build something that is really, really good. And it's hard because we're building for Gen Z. Like we're not building for a college. Like building for a college is actually pretty easy, right? Like you can build a website, like it doesn't have to look that good. Like, I mean, colleges buy a lot of stuff that I'm just like mind blown. But like building, for Gen Z is really hard because they're brutal, right? And they will destroy you, right? If they don't like what you have. And
it's got to be intuitive. It's got to be clean. It's got to like work immediately. No clunkiness. And then on top of all that, it has to be cool. It has to be what the cool kids like.
Yeah. And it has to have some sort of niche purpose that they want to use it for, right? Otherwise they're not going to use it. And that's always been a struggle for us because we're constantly battling against bugs, and the app has gotten way better over the years. But in the early days, like, dude, I mean, we had so many bugs. I mean, kids just like, what the heck's going on with this thing? And just getting killed. But and they'll let you know in the reviews. Like they'll email into you and say, what's going on with you guys? What's wrong with you?
They have nothing. They have nothing but time to complain about anything.
Exactly.
And that's not a bash on them.
1-star than it is a 5-star, right? Like most people want to complain, and most reviews you're going to get are going to be those people that didn't like it. It's not the people that loved it, right? So, but still with that, we have 4.7 stars in App Store, close to 10,000 plus reviews now. So the team's done a fantastic job. But it's been like literally through the gauntlet, to get there. And our colleges had to have patience with us as well, because I mean, when you're building an app over 5 years, like it takes time to get it into a place of where everybody's comfortable, the colleges and the students.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that product's a big differentiation for us. I think, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can build differentiation. I don't know if we've been like on where I would say like I would love to be, where we're not. I'd say where we were in the early days was just kind of brand loyalty with our existing clientele, right? So building into that existing clientele, doing conferences for your existing clientele, like user conferences, just pouring into them, because they're the people that, they're the people that are funding the vision, right? Like they're the ones using your product. They're the ones that are paying you. And I just feel like, we have a great customer success team at Zeemee that works really well, close hand in hand with our clients. I'd love to do more though, in terms of like building up even a program where like, hey, like I'm a Zeemee champion and I know how to use the Zeemee app, and like just kind of, a user base of Zeemee champions. And we have them, we just don't have an organized effort, right, to like pour into that. And I think that would be an important piece of differentiation for us that we could grow into.
That's cool. When you think back to some of the other projects that you've been a part of, even when you're a young guy, like what things do you keep in mind about positioning, or about coming up with a unique message, or a conversation that can help people understand what you're about, what you're not about,
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to what you were saying, right? Like, what's that? Like, what's your ethos? What's the thing that's driving you? What are you passionate about? Who are you? What's your only, right? Because if you know your only, then everything you do in the product is going to be informed by that. So, and everything we do in terms of a decision for our clients is going to be informed by that. So if our only is we're here to fight the loneliness epidemic, then everything that we do in the app better be about fighting the loneliness epidemic and helping people connect in real life, right? So just kind of filtering everything through that lens. I think a place that's maybe a little underlooked potentially in a lot of companies is just your own internal culture, right? Like if you want to differentiate today in, you know, the time of the Great Resignation, then you need to be very focused on your own internal culture, right? So what does that look like in terms of leading a team, building culture, you know, loving your team well, pouring into their mental health, pouring into, you know, just an understanding of a new work paradigm, right? That's something I get a little passionate about is like, especially here in Wyoming, like there's this mindset of like, oh, well, you know, you work from, you know, 7 to 6 or whatever, you know, every single day. We do a 10-hour day, 11-hour day, like, and that's how, you know, we've always worked, and that's the way it's done. And you're not a man unless, you know, you put in those hours. Like, yeah, that's not real anymore, right? Like that may have been fine, like when you were going out and like, you know, you were plowing a field, like, okay, like, but today we're information technology, we're on computers all day. Like there's different mental stimulus that's hitting us. And to assume that we're going to work in the same pattern in the same way that we worked the last 100 years is completely asinine, right? Like I'm walking around in my house and I'm carrying work with me in my phone at 10 p.m. at night, right? And someone can ping me and someone can email me. And if I don't have the discipline, I can go in and check that. If I don't have the discipline as a leader, I can ping people on Slack, you know, any time of day, any time of night, any weekend I want, I could call them. And so there's no longer any like kind of boundary between work and just home life. And so I think that, you know, we need to be really intentional as leaders as it relates to the culture that we're building at our companies. If we want to see retention with employees and we want to see people thrive. My friend Henry Kasner, you know, once said that if you really want to know how you're doing as a company, you know, you should survey the spouses, right? Which I thought was like a super interesting, like as people go home and they sit down at the table and they're talking, oh man, like Adam sucks. Like, you know, like talking about, you know, who they're working for, and what is the multi-generational impact, right? So Henry talks about that. What's the multi-generational impact you have on your team is they go back to the dinner table. It's not just their spouse, right? They're talking around their kids. And so what's this perspective the kids grow up with in terms of work? Like is work like this huge burden that sucks and like, oh, someday I'm gonna have to work for some, you know, loser boss? Or is it like, man, I love my job, I love how the company pours into me, you know, they celebrate us and everything that we do, and they want us to have intentional time as a family, and they pour into my fitness, and they pour into my faith, and they pour into anything that I love and I want to be about, like they pour into that. So I think there's a redemptive way to do culture at work, and I think there's ways that like really strip people of their dignity in terms of like traditional business. And I think that's a huge differentiation today for companies if they can really tap into that.
That's really good stuff. I talking to my friend Rio Franzman. Do you know Rio at all? His wife and him, they own the toy shop downtown.
No, don't know.
Anyways, I'd love to introduce you sometime, but
yeah, I'd love to meet him.
Yeah, their toy shop's really cool because it's like no screens and like very low amount of like batteries and electronics. It's
cool.
It's like, yeah, it's like really cool, kind of old school.
That's so cool.
Know? Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah. It's called Kid Curious, but anyway, like he leads a pretty cool company in the environmental space, and we've been doing some work with them. Casey Harvey Environmental is their name, but he was talking to me about, he's like, yeah, what do you guys do for benefits or do this or that? You know, we were kind of talking about some different stuff we've done. And he's like, we both were kind of like, well, what if you just didn't offer anything other than like health from the standpoint of like, we don't want you to feel like work is providing you all this extra fluff. Just like go home, like work and then leave work. You know what I mean? Like don't think about work while you're doing things that are like benefits, you know, from your job. Because just disconnect, like the benefit, like make the benefit like leave. You know what I mean? Like, do your job and leave, like, and your job isn't your identity. And I think that was an interesting like sway of like, because I'm like, oh, we should offer this and this and this and this. And I remember you had shared some cool stories about like the idea of buying, you know, breakfast or lunch or dinner or whatever was just like, you know, the undertone anyway, and maybe not like the you know, like the negative culture necessarily, but the idea was just like, get people to stay. If people stay, we'll get more work done. If we get more work done, we'll be more profitable. If we're more profitable, we'll raise more money. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is.
So, it was the Silicon Valley mantra, right? I mean, like before COVID, I mean, that's what Silicon Valley was. I mean, we would, you know, you'd want your engineers to stick around for dinner, right? So every time, you know, 6 o'clock rolls around, hey, can I order dinner for you guys? Like, who wants to stick around? You know, by that time, they've already put in, you know, 9 hour day. And so their brain is actually fried, right? So you're asking these guys to sit there and write code. It's really counterintuitive, right? Because actually, they're probably going to write poor code and you're going to end up having bugs and you're going to end up having problems. And so your effort to try to get them to stay later and pull all-nighters is actually hurting the company more than it's helping it, and hurting them, and more than so than the company, you're hurting them as an individual because you're not allowing them to basically have the mental space to get out, enjoy their life, you know, and have freedom and pursue their hobbies and they pursue things that they love. So it's kind of a wicked thing to do. And we used to do that. Like, that's what we did at Zeemee, right? And we thought, this is good. This is what companies do. This is the people get the war stories of the Ubers of the world where they just spent all, you know, all-nighters and cranked out this amazing app and built this company that, you know, went ubiquitous. But yeah, it's not a good way, I don't think, to build a company at all. And, you know, I mean, I feel guilty that I was ever even a part of that, right? Like, I wish I'd never even been a part of that type of culture, because I don't think it's honoring to the human being.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say in terms of standing on the shoulders of giants and so forth, like, that's something you were able to share with me. And I definitely factored it in the last 4 or 5 years when it came to like what my tactics were for trying to get work done. You know,
Yeah.
like even the other day, like we stayed later or whatever as a group of 4 or 5 of us or something. And I was like, yeah, let's buy some food, you know? And I had to check myself because I'm like, no, I just want to buy food. Like I'm literally, hey, if you guys are hungry, I'll buy. If you're not, it's fine.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah. And that's
work.
fine. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I did. Anytime I think about buying food after hours or whatever, I'm like, why? You know what I mean? And so, yeah. Just ask yourself why. What's your why? Why are you trying to do this? You know, are you just trying to like chain people through like, you know, whatever bread and circus that they're off? I don't know, you know.
But to share a meal together, I mean, that's a good righteous thing, right? I think that you know, and I think the tension for leaders is like the pendulum swing, right? So it's like, okay, I was over here and like, yeah, I wanted everybody to work 24/7 and be available on the weekends. And now I'm over here where it's like, hey, I want everybody to like, you know, completely unplug and, you know, take off as many mental health days as you possibly can. And really, like, probably the best place to be is more in the middle, where it's like, okay, yeah, people actually are working hard, right? But we honor their personal life. And so I think that's a tension we face of like, whoa, did I swing the pendulum too much? Where like now people are just like, man, this is like, you know, 6 hour days and I'm out, man. You know, I mean, I don't know, right? Like, there's something true and authentic about the early days of our culture of like work hard. And then there's something true and good about what we're saying today, where you need to take that rest and you need to have, you know, that Sabbath. And but I think there's a tension there that we have to continue to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. It's interesting too, because I think, and we can wrap up here soon. I know you gotta get going. But it's interesting to me that like the desire to just work is really a signal that like your business model isn't good. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's so good, dude.
At some level, because even when you talk about like we threw these parties and we did this stuff and you had cash that you had to like try to find a way to make effective, you know. It's such a funny place to be in, because normally like for all of, you know, existence, when it came to entrepreneurship and building companies, you didn't have cash. You found that you needed to find ways to do so you could figure out how to grow. You like grew, you had cash, then you would use that to grow, and then you use that to grow, and you'd kind of, you know, it's just a totally different thing. And
well, you had a bootstrap, right? And I think that, you know, most companies still do bootstrap. Like, most companies don't raise VC. Only 1% of companies actually get VC funding. And at least that's the, you know, the latest stats. I don't know if that entails like 1% of all companies, but 99% don't actually apply for VC funding. I don't know how that breaks down, but what I respect about OnlyCo and you as, you know, founder of multiple, I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur, right? Like you focus on multiple businesses. Like you've always been in that mindset of like, dude, if I don't create cash from day one, then I can't scale the business. I can't grow. And I think that's the best place to be, right? Like, I think if you can build a business like that, it's absolutely the best, because one, you're not diluting your own equity, right? Your own ownership in the business. Two, like you're building your business off of real metrics, I think that create sustainability. And we've seen that in the VC world now, where, you know, startups raise this ton of cash and the idea is scale and grow and conquer the world. And then we'll worry about revenue later, or we'll worry about profitability later. And then that profitability never comes because the scaling was too much, right? You hired too much, you spent too much. And so you end up being basically hurting your investors, right? And so yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, actually, a faith-driven entrepreneur had a podcast on this recently where there was someone on there, and she owns, a number of lumber yards, I guess, in Texas. And she inherited the business. It's a 100-year-old business. And she was saying basically her case was that she'd like to see more entrepreneurs build a bootstrap, right? And I agree with her. I think that there's a couple nuances to it, right? Like, one, did you inherit a business or did you start a business, right? Because it's one thing to say, like, if you inherited a business, right? Like, and you're saying, oh, well, entrepreneurs should bootstrap. Well, you inherited a business. Like, that's different than someone that started something from scratch, right? So we should tease that out. But then two, like, what are you building, right? So say you're starting from scratch, what are you building? If you're building technology, then, and you don't know how to build it yourself, but you're just the visionary, like the person that believes that it should be built, you're probably going to be hard pressed to do it without raising capital.
Yeah.
Right. Because you don't have the skill set to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the guys that can code and build technology, like that's a different story. Like they could probably bootstrap it. Right. That's probably, potential. A lot of companies that are VC funded, they're companies that have a big vision for tech, right? And a technology that they're building, but it doesn't, they can't get there with one person building it, part-time, or they can't get there because the founders aren't technical or something like that. So I think there's different, use cases here as to why you would raise that capital. Yeah. But ultimately, if I had my own personal druthers, right? Like I'd build a business that was bootstrapped, because I think it's just a healthier way to grow.
Yeah. 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 And it's interesting too, because when you don't have extra cash and you got to find a way to make it, you just have to think, nonstop about who is my customer? What are they like?
Yeah.
How do they buy? Where do they buy?
So it helps you solve your problems. Yeah.
When do they buy? What problems do they have? You just have to obsess about it. And because if you don't get it, you won't get the money, and you won't live tomorrow, And I think when you do have that padding there, wherever it comes from, you get to a spot where you get a little bit lazy about the customer. You get a little lazy about the problem that you're trying to solve. And I think you can be distracted by the feeling of like doing stuff, as opposed to the measurement of actually driving revenue and solving problems, And I think revenue is a signal that you're staying problem centric, like you're focusing on the problem that you're supposed to solve. Yeah. And it is, man, it's tough. You get that little bit of taste of like, because we like being distracted, right? Like it's fun to just kind of, especially as entrepreneurs,
like, this, right? Like, it's just like, I want to err towards the things I like.
Yeah. Just like, you're going to dream a little bit. And like, I'm not going to worry about the cash register, right? For a month or so. And then I'm like, oh shoot. There's no money. Shoot.
Yeah. Or I hired somebody to try to worry about that, right? Like they can focus on that, so I don't need to anymore. And yet the reality is that's not true. So
you still got to worry about it. Yeah. Anyway, well, hey, Adam, this has been awesome.
Dude, it's super fun, man. Thanks. That was a fun conversation. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, it's really just you and I talking. So hopefully some others that were tuning in or whatever, or tune in later, we'll get some value out of it. Super cool. You got to check out Zeemee and see what those guys are doing and follow their stuff. And
you need to check out Josh, follow him on LinkedIn.
There we
go. Good content. You're always putting out great content, man. So
thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And we've used Only at Zeemee.
Mm-hmm.
So they're top notch. They do an incredible job. So if you listen to this and you're not using Only, then shame on you.
Nice. Appreciate it, Adam. Thanks for the time, man.
All right, brother. Hey, good to see you, man. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll chat soon.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Thanks. Yep. Bye.